I used to be terrible at chess, and I lost so many games because I was only focused on attacking my opponent. But that is the completely wrong way to play chess. I will show you here what you need to do instead, and trust me, if you follow this advice, you are going to start winning so many more games. So what do you need to do? First of all, we need to talk a little bit about the opening, but I like to keep the opening short and simple. That is the key here, which means we want to put one of our pawns in the center. I just picked the D pawn here. You could also go with the E pawn. And then we want to develop our pieces and we want to castle on the king side. That is the plan. So I am going to develop my knight. I want to develop my bishop. I cannot do that. My pawn is blocking. So I am going to move the pawn because all I want to do is I want to be able to develop this bishop and I am looking to castle. And this is very simple. It might sound oversimplistic, but trust me, I used this exact strategy and it helps and it can get you to 2000 rating. So this is more than enough. So they are also developing. I am just going to castle here. That is our plan. We just want to develop the pieces and we want to castle. Okay. And now as soon as we are castled, we are in the middle game. And it is in the middle game that you will be able to use my strategy to start winning all of your games without ever needing to attack your opponent. So what do we do? Whenever it is our turn to move, first we need to look at what our opponent's last move was. That is very important. Their last move was bishop to d6. And bishop to d6 attacks my pawn on h2. Is that a problem? No, this is not a problem. But you need to sit on your hands, which means before you make a move, you need to force yourself to look at their latest move and figure out what it is doing, because otherwise you might be running in trouble. Okay, they don't really do anything. Then when it is our turn to move here, what I am going to look for is I am going to look for very simple chess, which means I want to play with my E pawn, D pawn, and C pawn, these three, and I want to develop my pieces, which means we still have a bunch of pieces on the back rank. We need to focus on developing until every single piece has at least been moved to a better square. So what are good potential moves here? Knight c3, knight e2, bishop d2. I am going to play pawn c4. Because in general, I like pushing the c-pawn first and then maybe putting a knight behind it. You don't want to do it the other way around and block in your own pawn. Okay, they capture. We need to be careful. We don't want to lose a bishop. So let's just recapture this and we are perfectly fine. And they castle. So whenever they make a move, I think, do I have to do something now? Do I have a problem? Of course, when they just castle, we don't have a problem. So we can just continue with developing the pieces. Okay. And again, they make a move. We need to look at what their move is doing. And you might be thinking by now, like, how are you ever going to win the game with this playstyle? Well, winning the game is actually quite easy. So many of your opponents are going to do the opposite of our strategy. We are trying to be safe, solid, and we just don't want to make any blunders. That's our strategy. Our opponent will usually be aggressive, they will try a bunch of things, they will miscalculate, and they will blunder. And that is when we are going to win material, trade into the endgame, and just simply win the game without ever needing to do anything spectacular or anything complicated. So again, they do something, we need to have a look at what's happening. They are challenging the pawn in the center, and we could also potentially capture their pawn. So there are a couple of things we could think about here. I think we could just trade. I think we could potentially push. Or I think we could also ignore, but ignoring is probably the dangerous option because then they can keep pushing and also attack my knight, and my knight would have to move, and then maybe in the far future there might actually be a problem. So we need to decide between capture and push. And whenever you need to make a decision like that, you need to ask yourself, which of these moves benefits me more and which of these moves benefits my opponent more. So that is what we need to think about. So the thing that I'm most worried about with pushing is that they might eventually have a push here. But of course, we are attacking their knight, so they have to move. I think very likely they are going to move to a5, try to attack my bishop, and then I can move my bishop, and this also prevents them from pushing to e4. So that means that whatever they try, we can play e4. And look at this position. We basically just gain space, which means we move their pieces up the board. This is definitely good for white. If we go for the exchange, well, we are helping them because we are getting more of their pieces into the attack towards our king. So that is not what we want. We always want to go with the safest possible move here. So pawn to d5 was very good. We just moved the bishop. This knight is looking silly here on the edge of the board. And at any point, we can play e4 and just lock down the center so they don't have an attack. They play the bishop here, so as always, I need to think, what is it doing? Well, it is pinning our knight. That could be a huge problem if we are careless, and at some point they play like pawn to e4. But what I'm going to do is just stick with our plan. We wanted to play pawn to e4 anyways, and that way we now have a very strong center. And they play pawn to c6, so quick calculation, they can take, and we have two pieces that can potentially recapture. Nothing really to worry about right here. Very important is also when your opponent is threatening something, or they have a piece that's basically in your position, being annoying, maybe causing some tactics, which this bishop is the perfect description of that. You should try to get rid of it, or at least solve the pin by blocking with the bishop. So I'm going to push pawn to h3, attack their bishop, all right. If they had captured, that would be fine. I could have taken with the queen. If they move back, that's also fine, because, yeah, their attack is gone. They don't have an attack anymore, and they go back. So again, it's our turn. What are we looking for? We are looking for very simple moves. We are looking to see if we can just develop, meaning get an extra piece into the game, and we don't want to blunder. So that is here why I got my bishop to f6. Okay. Now again, they play the rook. It's literally a useless move. This rook is stuck there, so not really too much going on. I'm also not worried about the tension in the center, because we always have that option to recapture here. Okay. So we need to think. It is our turn to move. What could we potentially do? We could try to play with the queen or the rooks. That is fine. We could also try to see if our opponent has any weaknesses or any troubles in their positions that we could potentially attack. I've been looking at this knight now for quite a while, because I think this knight is actually quite badly placed. It cannot go back. It cannot go forward. So if we can attack it, we can win it potentially. But I don't want to play anything risky. I don't want to take any risk. Like, for example, a move queen a4, I think could already be more risky, because yes, we are attacking the knight, but it's protected. Maybe our queen gets attacked, and it can be complicated. I think if I just play pawn a3, I am 100% sure pawn a3 won't lose me the game. Then I might just have pawn to b4 on the next move. Then we might win the knight without ever risking anything. So that is what we want. One thing I have to look at as well in any of these positions is, what if my opponent tries to like capture in the center and then we capture back? Because we never want to run into a fork, but that is also why this bishop that we have here is really amazing. It's pinning their piece. So yeah, they move the rook. As always, I'm looking, what is it doing? There might be something there. I will show you. So if we play pawn to b4 to attack the knight, this looks like it's just a free knight, right? It's just a free knight. We are not really doing something spectacular, just playing normal moves, and we are already potentially winning a knight. But what if they take here? What if they take on d5? Then they have an attack. But yeah, once I take on d5, we have now a centralized knight, and okay, yes, maybe they are going to save their knight, but we now have a very good piece in the center, so that is perfectly fine. So I am going to play this move pawn to b4. And if you are ever unsure what to do with every single move, what we want to think about is simply, are we sure that this move is not a blunder? Is this just a simple move that improves the position? If yes, that is the move that we want to play. So I'm going to just do this. I'm sure it's not a blunder. I'm getting my knight into the position. Oh, and they go here. I actually didn't expect them to go there. And that's a bit strange. Okay. And at some point, especially later in the middle game, you might have a tactic, and your opponents will usually, if they don't follow the strategy that I just I'm explaining to you, they will usually at some point make a mistake. They will allow you to do some type of trick or something to win material, or to at least cause a lot of damage in their position. So I'm looking at a couple of things. One of the things that I was looking at here for a while is, just by playing normal natural moves, I already have this. I already have two pieces aiming at that knight. Which means that if I ever take it, for example, with the bishop, they would have to capture back with that pawn. And yeah, I don't really think that is what you want to have as black. So that is something I'm looking at. The other thing is, if we follow our strategy that I explained already, they have a knight in our position. It is a bit annoying. Maybe they have a fork. Maybe they can jump in. So it might also be easy just to eliminate the knight to make sure it's gone. and then maybe we can activate our queen and attack the rook. I think that is also a very simple strategy. So I think we have a couple of options here. What to choose. The thing is, all of these moves guarantee that I don't lose the game. So honestly, doesn't really matter which one we pick. One more thing that we need to look at here is that we might potentially have a move here and then open up our queen and win the bishop. So that might be something that we could play for in this position. And just by the way that my opponent is playing this game, they are already making mistakes. They are basically at some point going to give you free material. So what I was looking at here is, what if I play knight takes f6? That's a capture, yes. They cannot take with the queen, that would be terrible. They take with the pawn. Well, their bishop is hanging on d6. Yes, they might take my bishop as well. But the pawns are not looking too great for my opponent, and we have a very good centralized queen. So I think this looks like an interesting move we might play. I think the queen to d3 plan could also have been played there, but I think this also looks like very normal, very natural play. And I know at the end of the day, we are just exchanging in a way. We are just exchanging pieces because, of course, as I said, we are not really trying to force an attack. If they make a lot of blunders and they allow us to have a free attack, sure, I will do it. But I'm mostly looking to just optimize my pieces. And it's my turn to move, but would you look at that? I think we have a capture on e5 with an attack on the rook and an attack on the bishop. So this just happened naturally because they blundered. And this really shows that you don't have to try to force any attack yourself. Your opponent will blunder. Your opponent is just going to allow you to win material at some point, at least in most games. And if they don't, be happy with a draw, because if they play perfect chess, a draw is the good result. I do the same in my games. So yes, we have a lot of pressure here. I don't really see any immediate way to win because we don't want to just start trading for no reason, because then we are just going to have an equal endgame, or an endgame with one extra pawn, but might not be enough to win the game. So I'm looking to see if I can get my final rooks into the game. That's still what I'm doing. I still want to just activate pieces. And activating this rook also helps because I was putting some more pressure on that bishop. If they didn't play any careful move like this, they would be losing the bishop. So again, this helps us. All right. And we still have one rook that we need to get into the game. How can we do this? Well, I think pretty simply, we could potentially double up the rooks there. We are just going to double up the rooks. And now, just by playing the most natural, most normal moves, we already have 4 pieces aiming at that bishop. The bishop cannot move, otherwise the queen drops, and the back rank is weak. So this is really looking terrible for my opponent. Yes, they can attack my queen with the rook, but I think if we just move, everything is fine. And it looks to me like my opponent is just completely losing here. So there should be something here. Let me just do some quick calculations. I was thinking we could take the bishop, and they take with one of the rooks. If they take with this rook, I think we have an incredible move with the queen check. And then this king is in trouble. We have a double file with rooks. This looks very amazing. I think there might even be a checkmate here. If they take with this rook, then the queen is protecting. The queen is protecting that pawn. But I think we can take, and what we have here is we have 2 rooks versus a queen, and we have an extra pawn. And 2 rooks versus a queen with an extra pawn is a winning endgame. And this shows why it is very important that you know your endgames well. Because you need to be as confident as I am when I play these games, and you need to be able to say, okay, I will be able to win that endgame. If you think, oh, no, that's not me, I would not be able to win that endgame, well, you definitely need to go to pegasuschess.com because I have a free endgame course there, so it's definitely going to help you. So how do you win an endgame like this? When you have the 2 rooks versus the queen. First of all, I want to keep my rooks connected, because as long as I keep my rooks connected, I cannot really blunder any of my rooks. I also want to make sure I don't have too many pawn weaknesses or a weak king, because then the queen will be able to do a lot of checks. So keeping everything closely together is a good strategy. So one of the potential moves, there are a bunch of moves, but one of the moves is playing the rook here, so I can attack that pawn and maybe check the king. So that was one of the possible strategies. They play the queen here, and now they are trying to sideways attack my pawn. But we need to really use the rooks together as a team. So I am thinking here this move, but that's a potentially dangerous move. I am disconnecting my rooks. So when we want to think about that move, we need to double check. Do they have any way to give us a check? They don't. So that usually means it is fine, and we will be able to double up. The move I am most concerned with is that they might play queen e6, try to win that pawn, but I think in any case, we have the back rank check, we have this check picking up a pawn, so that should be good. So I'm going to try to play for this move here, rook to f5. Okay, that's fine. And we have a couple of plans. I think we could try to double the rooks, win the queen by pinning it to the king, or maybe win the pawn. I think we could also honestly take here, and I think we also have that check. So a bunch of things that we need to have a look at. If I play the check, the king has to move up, and it's basically, yeah, still standing behind the queen, so we might be able to win it. If I go here with the rook, I think we might just be attacking the king at some point. And I think what I could also play, honestly, is to just take the pawn and just see what they are going to do, because they don't really have a good move anyways. And I think here f3 also works, and basically the entire position is closed. So we have a lot of moves. When you are unsure what to do, usually the check is the best move. That's just the rule to keep in mind. So the check is usually potentially the best move. So we have a check. Let's just see what we have from this position. Well, I think what I could do is I could play rook d7 to reconnect my rooks, and also to win on b7. We do have to be a little bit careful with what's going on here, because when I play a move, I don't want to suddenly be running into some type of checkmate there. I think we are fine because we have a check. But if you are ever concerned, you could also just take. This basically solves the calculation problem. And that is one of my biggest pieces of advice. The simplest calculation is the calculation that you don't need to do because you just avoid problems. So that is my main concern. There is no back rank checkmate. We always have the square for the king. So that is fine. And I think we can just win this pawn now with a check. Okay. And now I think comes the most crucial point of any endgame. Very difficult skill. And that is trading down material to try to force a simple winning endgame. So what I am talking about is, can we play rook f6, king takes f6, and can we be confident that we will win this endgame? And this requires some endgame knowledge. So as I said, PegasusChess.com, there is an endgame course. Can we win this? Well, it's 5 pawns versus 3. A 2-pawn advantage and a king and pawn endgame is winning. So definitely, yes, there might be a better move. Yes, there might be an attack. There might be something more spectacular. But please trust me, this is more than enough. How do we win this? Well, if you have 2 extra pawns, if you can use both of them at the same time. So I played f4, they take en passant, but I'm using both of them at the same time. A king can never stop this. A king can never stop this. And I will show you why. Because I'll just make any move. The king goes here. I will make any move. They can never capture the pawn at the back, because the moment that they do, you start running and they are not in time to catch up and catch your pawn. So this is basically unstoppable. The king cannot do anything here. The king can never capture. And that means there are 2 options. We can either rush this king over to that side of the board here and try to pick up pawns. I mean, his king cannot leave. Or we could also just move up with the king and try to use our king together with our pawns there to see if we can promote. Right here, we cannot make any progress, but it doesn't matter. We can just play here on this side of the board. And we are going to use this concept, which is known as zugzwang. So this means we want to force our opponent into a position where every move that they can play loses the game. So if I play pawn to b5, every single move they can play loses the game, because a pawn move loses anyways. Because of course, if they push twice, let's show you that. If they pushed twice, I could take en passant and I am promoting. And if they push once, I also take them. So the only move they have is a king move. But if they move back the king, I can move up my king. And that way I can just literally escort my pawns and try to promote. So I'm going to move up. I can move with the pawn. And we are just going to keep going like this. Move the pawn and the king together. And there are multiple things that you can do here. But I think this endgame is extremely spectacular, so I hope that I will be able to show it to you, or at least the exact variation that I want to show. So let's see if I can do it. Okay, I'll maneuver a little bit with the king. Okay, and I think here they are making it easy because we can push, and it's going to be very difficult for them, but I'll try to see if I can do something more spectacular. All right, we have a check. They don't do it. They don't do it. I was going to show you the most amazing checkmate, but they don't want to play it. If they play king e6, you go here with the king. That would be a stalemate, but they are forced to move a pawn, and then we simply have a checkmate with a pawn. That would be the most beautiful of checkmates. Okay, it's not going to happen here. We will just have to make a queen, and then hopefully you are able to win this endgame. When you just have an extra queen and a king, you should be able to checkmate.